Hello, welcome everybody. Please have a seat. Hey everybody, my name is Claes. I'm the DevNet Expert Exam Program Manager, and I will be trying today to get you all interested in the DevNet Expert and taking it as soon as possible. Um, so welcome. So the DevNet Expert. So I'll try to give you a picture of what the DevNet Expert is and what you can expect when taking it, how you can prepare, some basic overview of what we try to do with the DevNet Expert. So when we started with the DevNet Expert a few years ago, the discussions that we started with a large group of SMEs, we tried to figure out what should the DevNet Expert be, who should it be for. And what we found out is that we needed to make something that was relevant for the market today, and that's why we focused it on the network automation engineer. So I see some CCIEs, and that's really good to see that they are getting interested in a DevNet Expert. Yay. Uh, of course, indeed. So what we try to do is very similar to what we do today with the CCIE exams. We try to cover the full software development lifecycle. That means that we try to go for design, deploy, develop, test, maintain your software solution. And you'll see that on the exam. So on the exam, you will be tested first on design. That's the first part of the exam. And in a later part, you will be tested on all the other aspects of software development, like develop, test, and deploy your solution. So in order to get to that DevNet Expert, we obviously needed something called the exam topics, also referred to as the blueprint. So at Cisco, we use that kind of interchangeably. Sometimes we refer to it as exam topics. Other times we say blueprint. It's historically grown like this. So what do we have on the DevNet Expert exam topics list? We have 5 domains, 5 big domains that we have to take into account. First, we have the software design, development, and deployment domain. And as the name already says, you can expect a lot of the design section to be in this. This will be about developing software solutions based on performance, on availability, and stuff like that. There's a part of the CI/CD pipeline troubleshooting in here. GitLab is in there. So all these things are covered in domain 1. You can see like a number next to it. So as you can see, it's 20% here. That means that the part of the exam covered by this domain is 20%. So 20% of your exam will be about software design, development, and deployment. Next, we have infrastructure as a code, and this is really all about coding the infrastructure. Topics in here are things like writing a CLI application with Python. We also have consuming a REST API based on some API that is new to you. The thing we give you then is the documentation, and you have to like consume that API, and we can ask you questions about it. Other things in here are also Ansible, I think, Terraform is in there, NSO is in there. 30%, so it's a pretty beefy section of the exam. And a lot of what you will see on the exam will be from this domain. Next, we have network programmability and automation, which is all about programming the network. And the question that we get a lot from candidates or DevNet expert candidates is, do I need to be like a CCNP or a CCIE routing and switching, or do I need something other than like the qualification exam? The answer is no, you don't need that. The thing is, if you are a CCIE or if you are a CCNP route switch, you will have an edge and you will have some advantage in like solving these issues, solving these software issues. If you don't know what an access list is, and we ask you to deploy an access list automated, it's going to be difficult. We will give you information, we will give you examples, but if you don't know what it is, you might have an issue when trying to solve that solution. what else is in here? Like Yang is also in this domain. It's also kind of a big part. 25% still also like a big part of the exam. Next, we have containers. Yeah, I guess you all know like Docker, Kubernetes. Only 10%. So you might say, hey, I'm gonna take a strategy where I don't really care about containers. Kind of risky, but some people do that, and that's fair enough. I would say it's only 10%. We can only ask you so much about it. So if you're really prepared for it, you could get easy points on this one, because when you're really prepared for small domains, those are kind of easy points, right? And last but not least, security. We really thought that security was like a really important part of software development. So that's why we included it. So this includes like the OWASP framework, and also like securing your API and stuff like that. So this is an example of a domain that we have in the DevNet Expert exam topics. And as you can see, we have a few parts in here. Like you have the domain part, like I said, you have the task level and a subtask level. So if you're studying, take this into account that when we ask questions about domain 1.1, for example, we could ask you anything about the subtasks. So it could be a combination of the subtasks, but it could also be just one. Also, we don't have to ask everything of domain 1. It could be that you get an exam form that only has like domain 1.1, 1.3, and 1.4. On another exam form, it could be that we ask things about 1.2, 1.5, depending on the exam form. So just to make sure that we can ask questions that are relevant, that are not too small, because we don't like to ask really small questions just about everything, just because we have to cover everything. So the domain weight I already explained. So on the exam itself, so like I said, there's two parts. You have the design part in the morning when you arrive. There's a 3-hour part, like kind of web-based, kind of like a written exam style. And I'll go into detail a bit more later on what it looks like. So basically, imagine it like a big, like written style exam. Backward navigation is disabled, so it's a progressive storyline. So when you start the exam, you get questions and you build further on the storyline. Point values are hidden, and the skills are all about planning and designing your software solution. Then we have module 2, and that's when the real deal starts. That's when you start configuring and coding your solutions. It's a 5 hours fixed module. And like you see, we say 3 hours fixed, 5 hours fixed. That means that if you are early with module 1, you finish like in 1 hour. You cannot take over that 1 hour into module 2. And that's the case with all the expert exams. So it's not only with DevNet Expert like that. In this section, in this module, we have hybrid and web-based items. So you could still get some of these web-based items, but it's going to be very limited. It's going to be 1 or 2 items like that. Backward navigation is enabled. I could even say more. You get all the information at the get-go. So what you could do as a strategy is look into all the items before you start your exam, make a strategy on which ones you want to pick first, and build your confidence based on that. So if you see topics that you can solve easily because you know that really well, that topic, you can do that first and then go on to the more difficult topics of the exam. Point values are shown here, so you could also base your strategy on the point values of an item. And it's all about developing, testing, and deploying and maintaining your software solution. So first off, the design module. We see that a lot of our candidates are intimidated by the questions we ask in the design module, because the design module is not just a question with the options. You will get like resources that you have to refer to. So based on what you see in the resources, you have to select the answer. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So we'll have an example of a design item, and I'll show you what is meant by it. In a way, every design item carries the solution to the problem. So in those resources, if you read them really carefully, you'll probably find the solution somewhere and you'll know what to pick. But you need to go through those resources really in detail to know what the right answer is. So we do use partial scoring on design items. So it could be that you get like a drag and drop or a matrix style question, where you can get like partial scoring. So 3 out of 5 points or 2 out of 4 points, depending on the item. So the DTDM section, that practical part afterwards, is kind of based on the design module storyline, but it's not a one-on-one mapping. So there is some interaction between the modules, but it's like very limited. And the last thing is really important. Pay attention to the context you're working in. Like we see a lot of candidates coming in and do the design section and they think they know better, right? You're an engineer and you know what the best solution is. And in case of an exam, that's not always true because we give you resources and based on that, you have to make a selection. It might not be the ideal solution to the problem, but you have to find out what we think you need to answer. And based on the resources, you can. So you don't have to be stubborn and take the option that you want and that you want to be the right option. No, you have to select the option that we think is the right option, right? It's always like that in a written exam, but it's even more true in this design module. Yeah, you can like build a strategy. It's about 30 items on this section. You have 180 minutes. Well, you can do the division. It's like 6 minutes approximately per item. So if you take 6 minutes, on some you won't need it, on others you will because there's a lot of resources. So you can build your strategy on that. There's a countdown timer, so you can see how much time is left. And I would say do not lose too much time on an item because especially in the beginning, there's still a lot of scoring opportunities on the exam. An example, right? So this is relevant blueprint items are 1.2 and 2.1. So if you look into this question, you'll see that those are the blueprint topics that are covered. So let's read it. Which approach do you suggest the automation team take to ease the management of access control lists? Create a Python tool using the click library with commands to manage the ACLs. Share Postman collection of RESTconf API requests to manage the device ACLs. Build an Ansible role that can be used to manage the ACLs and create an NSO service that manages the ACLs. So that's the question that you're presented with. And I can see some people already saying, hey, 3 is the best answer, right? Well, my answer when I see this is, well, it depends, right? These are all things that could solve like the ease of management of an access control list. So seeing this, because you're an engineer, you might think, hey, I really like Ansible. That's the right answer. In this case, let's see at the supporting material that we give you, right? So this is an email from a director of IT. Hey, expert. So on the exam, we give you the benefit of the doubt. You are the expert, right? So the new process implemented by the architecture and operations to make changes to the external access list at the request of security have resulted in missing our SLA with partners 4 times in the last week. Not to mention barely catching serious configuration errors at the last minute. Please sync up with the ops lead and come up with a permanent solution to this issue. So this is the first resource that you get. It's an email from the director of IT. And yeah, he's giving you a hard time that they missed the SLA with partners 4 times already. So let's go on and have a look at the next resource. So you have your chat with the ops lead. And of course, the ops lead is very supportive to his team. He says, hey, expert, it's not that bad. The process has only been in place for 3 weeks. My team is doing a great job, right? I understand, but after 3 weeks, you must have ideas for improving. True, the problem is creating the correct configs, too much variations between requests. What if we could standardize the workflow, common inputs, fill in the blanks, stuff like that? So that would actually help. The tools your team has given us to get our network state have been so helpful. So this is your chat with the ops lead, and he understands what the problem is. So right. So let's go on and check your email from the network architect, which is another resource. So you need to soak in all of that information, put it together, and try to find out what the solution is here. So per stand-up call this morning, there are some details on the network. So that's important to know. What are we dealing with here, right? So the devices that are in scope for the new access list. Most of our locations have a standard deployment, ASR routers with iOS XE 17.2 code. However, this is a new standard being deployed. There's still 15% of the locations to be updated. Those sites have a variety of router platforms, multiple vendors, and some that are 10 years old or more. We won't complete a refresh for 12 months. So you can see that there's really a big variety of routers, old routers, more than 10 years old. They probably don't support any of the REST API stuff. So you need to take that all into account, right? And then you have a chat with the service desk developer. And this is maybe where you have to think about, hey, who's going to be the stakeholder of this question, right? And if you read this, you need to be able to discern that information that the service desk developer is probably the stakeholder and is the person you are creating this solution for. We have just finished development and testing of the new workflows to approve the ACL request. That's great news. So once a request approved, what happens? So it is routed to the operations team to execute the work. So initially, the IT director gave the ops lead a hard time, but the operations team is actually the executor of the work, while the service desk developer actually creates those ACL requests in the service desk system. So he is the one who's the main stakeholder here, right? So it is routed to the operations team. Does the user request include all the source and destination details? Yes, and the workflow could continue after approval, but the ops lead told us each request is too unique. So based on all of this information, you can have a look at the question again. And what do you think would make sense now? Look, create a Python tool. Yeah, it could still work, right? Share a Postman collection of REST APIs, build an Ansible role. If you put it all together, probably for a service desk developer, this is the right option, right? So, and it's not because we are Cisco, but yeah, you know. But as you can see, this is our thought process, and this is just an example. So before we put something like this in production, we always do a review phase. We get this through a lot of SMEs. Probably there's some things in that could be worded more clearly. We always do modifications if there's a mistake in a question, or and we also retroactively solve scoring for candidates that were failed and we turn it into a pass. That's also possible. So yeah. So as I say, think your key stakeholder is a service development. So then we have the DTDM section. So where you're really gonna do the hands-on. I would always suggest when you start an exam, go through the questions, look at what you're dealing with, because when you know what you're dealing with, you can better prepare for what's gonna come. Points are awarded per task if the solution meets all the requirements. So we'll give you a question, and I'll have an example for this one as well. We'll give you a question with requirements, constraints, validation steps, and you have to comply to all of the requirements and also to the constraints. If you miss one of the topics, one of the things in the requirements, you fail the question. There's no partial scoring, right? So there may be many valid solutions, and this is where you can be a real engineer and like solve a solution the way you want. What we do, we just tear down the whole lab. What you have to do, always do a commit and push, right? So we have a Git repository. where you can commit and push your solutions to. And that's the only thing we keep. That Git repository is the holy grail for our grading of the exam. What we do is we tear down the whole lab, build it up again. It could be a different environment, could be different environment variables. It could be totally different. And we then we run your code again, and based on the outcome, we will award you the points if you have it right. So it's outcome based. Yeah. It's in the main branch of the repository. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, some guidelines: don't get stuck. Set a time limit per item. You know you're gonna get like a lot of items to deal with. I would say per point 5, 6, 7 minutes at the max, because otherwise you're gonna get in trouble. There's a session countdown timer. If you don't find a solution, stop and move on. We see a lot of great engineers that are just too stubborn to stop with like debugging their code to find a solution, and then end up with only 2 questions they answered because they wanted to find a solution, right? So yeah, that's important. And even use a prohibited solution if needed, just to see if things work. And sometimes you can find the right solution, right? And troubleshoot before asking help to the proctor. I would say the proctor is your friend, but don't ask too many questions. He can get mad, right? So this is an example of a question. Deploy an ACI infra to infrastructure as code. So we're moving away from manually provisioning our ACI fabrics and are starting our ACI IAC journey to ACI Ansible. Your task to complete our Ansible playbook so that it correctly deploys an ACI fabric. So on completion, the playbook must do the following: create the required tenants, application profiles, and so on. So you can see that this is quite a lengthy question. And it has some parts. You have the context, which is basically the question. You have the instructions, the constraints, and the validation. If you stick to this and you make sure that you always apply the right instructions, yeah, like you comply to this and you comply to the constraints, you should be fine, right? A validation, we also give you some validation steps that you can do in order to check whether your solution works or doesn't work, right? So once you have done all of this, you can basically run this script and wait to see if you pass. This is basically just a fun script to check the status on the CCIE database, whether you passed or failed. So it's just a joke. Okay, thank you. One more thing. There is like a prize raffle. So underneath one of the shares, we have put like a ticket, and you can win like a Fire Stick or an Echo Spot, I think. So if you check underneath your share, and if it's not, you can also check the share next to you. Check these shares maybe. That one? No? Is it there? You have it? All right. Congratulations. You won. All right. Thank you, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you want to talk to the first DevNet expert ever, he's over there, the external DevNet expert. So have a talk with him if you want to know more information about how his exam was. So feel free. So I hope it was valuable to you, and see you.